Welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. As the calendar turns to November, that means the clock starts ticking. And the first thing that always comes to an end, Bill, is youth football. This week is the week everybody's been playing for. All season long, the intensity in search of that little plastic trophy, but the ability to call themselves a champion. And, Bill, there is no doubt which organizations have carried the banner this year in youth football. All you have to do is look at a lot of the pairings for championship weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's a couple of familiar names with a bunch of teams in these championship games.
Right. Well, Old Mill has 5 teams in the Division I championships on Saturday at Severna Park High School. Brooklyn Park has 4 teams. They play each other in a couple of those games, but that's pretty impressive that 2 North County organizations, which is a bit of a change. I mean, the old days, Severna Park always had several teams in the finals. Gambrel's Odenton was always a factor. Yeah, I remember days when Gork had 6 or 7 teams in the finals. So this is a dramatic change to the North, and we can give you the pairings. I'll just go through everything real quick. Friday night at Annapolis High School, these are Division III games. 7:15 p.m., 12 and under, Crofton versus Powell. 8:45, we have the varsity U game. It is Powell versus Cape St. Clair. Division II at Severna Park High School on Friday night, we have the varsity U game, Severna Park versus Old Mill. Then the Saturday is the big day, Pete. That's the Division I. The bulk of Division I finals are all Saturday at Severna Park High School. Action begins at 10:30 with the 8U game, Generals Highway versus Brooklyn Park. That should be a war.
That's my boy Eden Coates getting ready to do some work, and Brooklyn Park looking for revenge from one of the great regular season games from this past
Generals
year.
Highway beat them, right?
Beat them, and Eden Coates wrapped it up with a 91-yard run in the final minutes to put that game away.
Right, and then in 9U, Old Mill versus Brooklyn Park, and Old Mill is actually coached by Jason Clark, who is the president of the AAYFA, Anne Arundel Youth Football Association. That's a rematch of last year, Pete, 2017 championship. 10U, Old Mill versus Severna Park. 11U, Old Mill versus the Panthers. 12U, Old Mill versus Brooklyn Park. And finally at Varsity U, Brooklyn Park versus Severin. And then finally we got some games Sunday, Pete, Division II at Severna Park High School. Noon, and here's an interesting, I did not realize that Bowie, South Bowie is playing Gork. When did Bowie become part of the...
South Bowie became part of the AAYFA last year. All of their teams in that first transition year were forced to play Division I. A lot of them took their lumps, but a lot of them have gotten their act together. Jesse Marks, of course, former Southern Bulldog, heading up that organization. They've done an outstanding job and been a real nice addition to the AAYFA, and nice to see them having some folks around here championship weekend.
Right, and then also in Division II, 9U, Powell versus Cape. 10U, South River versus Gork, I believe, is going to be that matchup. 11U, it's Gork versus Generals Highway, and then at 6 o'clock, Bucks versus Severn. Then we also have some games at Glen Burnie High School. So the games are, we got Annapolis hosting, Severna Park hosting, Glen Burnie hosting, so several different venues. Division III at Glen Burnie, 7U, Brooklyn Park versus Generals Highway, 8U, Severna Park versus Severn, 9U, SRYA versus Gork, 10U, Panthers versus Gork, and at 11U, 6 o'clock, Bucks versus Severna Park. 7U?
Yeah.
Okay, why do they don't do that in Division I and
No,
2?
it's all just one division. It's an instructional division, played with instructional rules and regulations all year long. That's why they go in that group. $5 admission, important to point that out.
Yes, you got to pay.
Remember,
Don't
no
get angry.
backpacks, no backpacks inside the stadium. Respect the stadium grounds, please. That's one of the more important things. But as I wrote in a post on the AAYFA message board this week, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in our high school segment coming up, if you don't believe the work that these volunteers do means anything, but I'll say this. I thought this year, and not that there are as many championship level clubs, but I thought this year was as deep a year in terms of high school football in Anne Arundel County. We had a lot more teams up around the 5-6 win mark. We had more teams competing for a playoff spot. I mean, going into the last week of the season, you had 4 teams in 4A East still alive for that final playoff spot. So if you don't believe that the work that these youth league coaches do every Saturday and every Sunday during the youth league season, it does matter because it has increased the depth. Look, South River didn't have the depth the last couple of years. Now they do because of what's been happening in the SRYA program.
Them some good players,
you know, and we look all around at the different ones. You got Powell, you got Gork, you got SRYA, Cape represented. I mean, look at Broadneck. Broadneck for years has got, Cape has always been criticized because most of their teams have been Division II instead of this alleged label Division I. And all they do is send players to Broadneck, and Broadneck wins 9 or 10 games every year. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what division you play. It just matters about getting the solid fundamentals of the game underneath of you so when you go to the high school level, those coaches can then refine it. And we have just seen an unbelievable depth of talent this year in high school. It's good to see because the more teams that are competitive, the better it is all across the board. So, I mean, we even talked to like teams like Glen Burnie who were in games. They only won like 2 or 3 games, but they were in more games against better teams than they've ever been.
Well, and you've got to hope that this 4 teams from Brooklyn Park in the finals, you got to hope that helps the North County program because that's who should be feeding them. We should say that our highlights this week come from the Old Mill versus Generals Highway 9U game. That was the J.C. Clark. Old Mill won that game 34-0. That's what our highlights are from this week.
Old Mill, just a tremendous, tremendous job all across the board. And, you know, they have hit the ground running. Got their finally, I mean, for years they played without a real complex of their own. They had to practice at Southgate, which has not been optimal. Play some of their games when they could at Old Mill High School, not that it was always available. Now they have their own place over at Randazzo where they can finally call their own to have consistent amount of practice. And as Demetrius Ballard said this week, Randazzo is going to be pretty full this week in terms of practice time. So
that's right.
Good luck to all of the teams that are competing. I'm going to try and get out to some games on Sunday. Bill and I, of course, have to head to Orlando on Saturday, so we will not be at the Division I championship games like we normally are Saturday morning. So coming up, we'll talk high schools. We'll give you the pairings, who's still alive, and we're going to get a rematch of the Dena Bowl right away. What an addition in game number 1. If the playoff game's anything like the first game, we're in for another treat.
That's
Back
right.
with that when we return on the Gridiron Review. Bill, all year long we have talked about, and we talked about it in our last segment, depth of program. Look at what the Bucks and Panthers have done. You've got direct proof of that. One of the best Dena Bowls we've ever had with Northeast with an amazing rally. What a year it's been for Brian Balblitz's team. We've been talking about them all year, but you look at what the Bucks have done in their feeder program that helped feed in there to Northeast there. The Panthers feed a lot into Chesapeake. A 28-27 thriller on Friday night where you just can't beat it. 24 seconds to go. Northeast wins the game in a big comeback.
No, what an incredible game. I mean, Northeast falls behind 27-7 at halftime. And, you know, Bob Hoke, our high school sports editor at Capital Gazette, hates when I do this. But I will say Brian Boblitz has got to be the coach of the year.
It's not even close.
I mean, what he has done to turn around that Northeast program, and I don't know what their record was last year, but it was, 3-7 or something of that nature.
They're 7-3 and a playoff team.
Right, and they beat their rival Chesapeake, knocked them out of the top spot in the playoff rankings, and so now Chesapeake is 2, Northeast 3, and that's why we'll have a rematch on Friday night at Chesapeake. But a backup quarterback, I think their starting quarterback had to leave the game, and Billy Katzenberger, is that, I believe, he threw that long touchdown pass to Josh. Say the name, Pete. Critchick, right. Well, hopefully, Josh, we're getting your name right because you had a big game. You had an 85-yard return.
I'm sure they know how to call 410-280. You know what the rest of the number is, if not over at the Capitol. But
right. What a game!
But what I love is look at what it's created. Look at the atmosphere that it creates. And look, Northeast is affected by anybody with all these kids that defect to private schools.
Oh yeah.
New building, new stadium. Tremendous program now under Brian Balblitz. A lot of those kids are going to stay home, feel that neighborhood pride, and help build something there with Coach Balblitz. Just amazing what he's been able to do. It is hard to turn around a high school program. I don't think people realize how hard that is and what he's been able to do. And this is going to be a great game coming up this week, a rematch at Chesapeake.
Pretty cool video that Brian Boblitz posted when they returned home on the bus, a short ride from Chesapeake up Mountain Road to Northeast. There was a large contingent of fans to welcome the team back and gave them a hero's welcome. It was pretty cool.
Look at that. That's
That's community pride.
Community, man.
Very, very cool.
It's community. It's people coming together for something positive. We got too much negative stuff that goes on a daily basis. Props to the folks over on Duval Highway for getting that done. Look, Ethan Williams continues to write records and writes more records. This past week, 5 catches, 108 yards. Josh Early threw for 244 as Broadneck ended Annapolis's playoff chances with a 48-6 victory. Bill, I'm not sure. I go back a couple years and Old Mill was undefeated going into the first round at 10-0, where somebody has just been so dominant all year the way Broadneck has. And, of course, South River now will come into this game after upsetting Old Mill 34-19. It's not really an upset. They both came into the game with the same record.
Right.
But, again, I talk about youth football. You've got great depth of the SRYA program, and look at what it has done. It's given now, Coach Dolch the depth of players that they need to go out and compete with these teams now. And that's a huge win. To beat Old Mill 34-19 with a playoff berth on the line, just a tremendous win for South River.
Right, another big game for Joe Foy, the tailback, outstanding tailback, again, up over 100 yards. He had 2 touchdown receptions. Coach Dolch nominated his quarterback, Faust, as the player
David
of the
Faust, he went 9 of 14 for 177 yards, 3 scores in the rain. He also had a rushing touchdown, so he accounted for 4 scores in the game.
He stepped up big in this game, and we haven't talked about the South River quarterback too much because they're such a running team, and Joe Foy's been the star. But that's a good way to use Joe Foy. Get him the ball out in space. He had 2 receiving touchdowns in this contest. You were talking about Broadneck, Ethan Williams, R.J. Harris, poor guy. What a great receiver he was at Arundel, and he had Billy Kosh as a quarterback.
Yeah.
Part of the reason R.J. Harris set so many records is he was teamed up with Billy Kosh for a couple of years, and they were quite the tandem. And now Ethan Williams, and you're wondering, he's going into his senior year. Here he is, a Division I player going to Boston College, and you had a freshman quarterback, and you're wondering, would that compromise his ability to succeed? And lo and behold, Ehrlich's been fantastic. And, we've talked about all season. Well, Ethan Williams broke R.J. Harris's career receptions record.
Got 193 now going.
That is amazing. But Ehrlich threw 5 touchdown passes, and he broke the Broadneck single-season record for touchdown passes. I don't know if that was Kanan Gabley, who's now at Denison having a good career. But, Ehrlich, I don't know if there's ever been a freshman as the first-team All-County quarterback, and we may have multiple quarterbacks on the All-County. I don't know. Bob Hoke and his team will pick that. But I don't know how you keep this kid off. And, you can talk about he has great weapons in Ethan Williams and Andre Woods, and they've got a great running back in Jason Carcamo. But, my God, the kid's been amazing. So I don't see how you can keep him off the All-County.
Well, I think he's got a spot on there somewhere. The question is, how do you differentiate between him, Sly, Kenneth Spalding, who has spent some time at quarterback, time at running back, and Jaden Umberger. This week he's been back at quarterback, and they had an amazing comeback against Mount St. Joe. And I think, let's talk about the MIA for a minute. And as they go forward, the great thing here is Annapolis Area Christian School into the C final again. They'll take on Concordia Prep, the former Baltimore Lutheran. St. Mary's and Pilati will get a rematch now in the B Conference final coming up of a game 2 weeks ago. Pilati won 14-0. And whatever lies ahead for the A Conference, if you've watched most of those teams this year, outside of Gilman, who obviously, they were hurt the most by all the St. Francis stuff, you look at the rest of those clubs, I don't think there's a whole lot separating the rest of those teams. So I think going forward, I think what's left of the MIAA A Conference, it's really going to be good football going forward. Going to be a lot of competitive football. Just look at Spalding and Mount St. Joe this past week, where Spalding comes from behind for the big win.
That was a thrilling game. I sat on the plane on the way back from Cincinnati next to Jake Hawk's father, John, and he has been an assistant coach for Rich Holzer for many years, dating back to when Rich was at Meade, and obviously Jake Hawk played at Meade, and so his father helped Holzer at Meade, and then he followed Holzer to Mount St. Joe. This year he's not coaching as much because he wants to see his son play, so he's not around on Friday nights because he's traveling to various games.
He was on the plane with me Saturday morning with Zach Avey's parents going to Cincinnati.
And he is on the way home with me on Sunday morning, and he was telling me it was raining cats and dogs in that game. Second week in a row that we've had massive rain showers. A lot of the public schools moved their games forward to try to beat the rainstorm. Spalding's game was at 7, and it hit big, and that game was unbelievable, 23-0. And Spalding rallies and comes back, and John Hawk said it was crazy, and he was talking to, because Holzer had the ball at like the 5-yard line, 4th and goal, and Hawk was telling him, go for it, man, come on, and they didn't. I think they tried to kick a field goal there, but great comeback, and as you mentioned, Jaden Umbarger, the Navy recruit, was spectacular again. He really was the catalyst of that comeback. And it is interesting. They are using Umbarger at quarterback sometimes. Other times he's a tailback. Other times they split him out as a wide receiver. He's really a slash type player.
And what's interesting to note is look at that position and what it has produced. Zach Abey, great athlete, quarterback, wide receiver, a wrestler at Spalding. You got Evan Fockman, a guy who was good enough to play quarterback. Now he's playing outside linebacker over at the Naval Academy. So the tradition of a great athlete playing that position has stayed in place at Spalding because you clearly see what kind of athlete Kyle Schmidt wants at that position.
All right. Well, and at college football, you never know. There's a lot of guys who do not play at the collegiate level the same position they played in high school. So if you can be a versatile guy, play multiple positions, it cannot hurt you moving forward. I mean, we'll talk about the Severn River Classic, which is the St. Mary's Severn showdown at the end of the year. St. Mary's won that game 12-0. Again, another game played with rain, and so it made things difficult offensively, and St. Mary's won a slugfest. Severn, tough year. They finished 2-7. Just a real tough year for them after, last year was such an uplifting season for Severn, and this year was just a kind of a downer. But so St. Mary's will have a rematch with Pilati, which Pilati beat them pretty soundly.
14-0.
Well, yeah.
So
right.
they just got to find a way to score.
Right. But you were talking about AACS and Concordia Prep. I found out Concordia Prep is moving up to the B Conference next year. They're a program that has made a commitment to recruit, and they want to aspire to play at a higher level. I don't understand the AACS situation. They are now in the MIAAC Conference Championship game for the 5th straight year, which is an incredible accomplishment, great consistency, but I mean, you've got to want to compete at a higher level. Do you want to keep winning the C Conference Championship every year? Why don't you move up and see what you can do in the B Conference?
But see, I think you got to put maybe that's not their priority. Maybe they're just look. There are only so many kids to go around in private schools. I'd love to know the actual enrollment roster size for AACS. Maybe being in the C Conference is what fits them. The problem is with Concordia Prep moving up, how many C Conference type teams are going to be left around for them to play?
Right.
To me, the B and C should just mold together and be one deal.
I think that may be the answer. And we'll have our Rhodes Trophy brunch in a few weeks, and I'm going to ask Mike Lynn, the head coach at AACS, what is going on with that. But I mean, 5 straight MIAAC Conference Championships, that means it's time to move up. It means you've mastered that level, and you should go up and challenge yourself at a higher level. That's just my opinion.
By the way, let's go back to the Spalding game real quick. Let me give you some incredible numbers for Jaden Umbarger here.
Yeah.
17 of 32 passing for 233 yards and a touchdown. He also ran 29 times for 111 yards, and he caught the decisive 4-yard touchdown pass from Austin Tudis for the game-winning touchdown. Right. I mean, what more can a guy do? I haven't seen the paper for Monday yet, but he has to be the Capital Gazette player of the week.
If they nominate him, that's important.
Well,
you got to nominate. We don't pick him out of thin air. You got to nominate. But I think Ethan Williams is hands down Player of the Year in Anne Arundel County, Rhodes Trophy winner. But when they go to the Rhodes Trophy vote, I fully expect Jaden Umbarger to be the runner-up.
Is he? I think there's going to be some votes for Umbarger.
There may be. I mean, I'm not going to.
There's going to be some votes.
I'm not going to try to sway anyone.
I think Nick Goodmalloy's going to try to throw Amon Middleton at you.
Oh, they'll nominate some other people. But I mean, Ethan Williams has had not only an incredible senior season, but an incredible career. And it is not a career award. It's supposed to be
career
for
achievement
just this year.
But
he has been amazing, and he is
a calming influence for a rookie quarterback.
Right, and I think that's the key figure. 10-0. When you are the best player on the best team, that kind of I lean your way. But Umbarger deserves some support. He's been outstanding himself.
Arundel at North Point, South River at Broadneck, Northeast at Chesapeake, and of course the B and C Conference Championship games that are likely going to be on the weekend. Dates and times for those have not been established as of the taping on Monday afternoon for us here on the Gridiron Review. But of course, you can find all that information at Capital Gazette.
Real quick, I'll mention the other scores, and literally disappointed in some of the coaches for not reporting their scores. I mean, South River Old Mills, a playoff game. We had reporters, committed elsewhere and couldn't cover it, but somebody needs to call that in. South River wins the game and is going to the playoffs, and nobody bothers to report. Also, North County beat Southern, so Southern finishes winless season. North County, I think that was their second victory of the season. And then Meade beat Glen Burnie. And last but not least, Arundel shut out Severna Park. I think you mentioned that,
yes.
35-0.
35-zip.
Please, as we go into 2019, call in your results. It really is helpful to call in your results. And we may not get it into the Saturday edition because of our new deadline, but it'll run in Sunday's paper. It'll be online, which is all really anybody cares about anymore.
Come up with some kind of fancy hotline like 1-800-FOOTBALL.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, Pete. Maybe that's what we need to do.
I'm here for everybody. Right. I'm here for everybody. I haven't had a day off since September 9th. I'm here for everybody.
And you're not about to have one anytime soon either.
Nope,
Pete.
you got that right, my friend, because college basketball starts this month too. Coming up, colleges and pros when we return on the Gridiron Review. Wasn't great for any of the colleges or the pros. We went 0 for 4.
Swing and a miss.
Unless you count Bowie State Division II team won the CIAA North Division Championship.
Mir Hall's a really good quarterback.
Yeah, Mir Hall broke a bunch of records at Bowie State with this win this past week.
He's like a national player of the year.
Yeah, could be in the CIAA championship game for the Bulldogs, so congratulations to Bowie State. Look, I think what happened at College Park this week, Bill, was predictable. With all the chaos that the Board of Regents put them in, put those kids in a terrible spot, put the coaches in a terrible spot, and Michigan State comes in, a beleaguered team themselves with some injuries, but they handled the Terps 24-3. But I don't know how you expected Maryland to play that game this week. I really don't. With focus, with some upheaval within the locker room and stuff like that, I don't know how you expected them to play a football game this week.
It's a mess in College Park, and what happened last week was just a debacle all the way around. How the Board of Regents thought it was a good idea to put DJ Durkin back on the field, and forget the moral implications, the fact that a kid died on his watch, forget the whole toxic culture business, whether it's true or not. The bottom line is he's a compromised coach. He can't recruit. Yep. They haven't had a single kid commit. One kid has committed since Jordan McNair died. Their recruiting class is ranked dead last in the Big Ten. Can't recruit. You got half the team doesn't support him. I mean, he's dead in the water. How the Board of Regents thought that was a good idea is beyond me. And Wallace Lowe overturned them, even though he agreed to it one day, but the next day fired DJ Durkin. And I don't know how you play. And then they had a fight at practice. Punters fighting, guys. I mean, come on. Wade Lee's Australian. He was punching out the backup punter who's a walk-on. And, the whole thing's a damn mess. And Maryland players are refusing to speak to the media now, didn't talk after the game, didn't talk during the week after Durkin was fired. I don't know how.
I don't blame them this week. And you know me. I mean, I'm all for – I know how the college game operates, and I know how it works within the sports information department. But I thought this week you just can't put microphones and notepads in front of those kids because it's not fair. It's been too emotional of a week. You don't want a young man to say something that, he may regret in the heat of the moment. So I think you do a good job. You protect. Look, nobody had protected the kids up until now anyway, for the most part. So this was a great job by Maryland to protect those kids on Saturday from that environment.
Well, in the game, Maryland was actually right there. Byron Coward, who's the defensive end that transferred from Auburn, is having a pretty good season. Mm-hmm. He had an interception for a touchdown, but as he was crossing the goal line, a trailing player from Michigan State punched the ball out, and it ended up being resulting in a safety, and that could have cut the game down to, I think it would have been 17-10 at that point. That was a real turning point, but Maryland played hard, but it's just not enough there. And again, it's kind of been their MO against the upper level teams in the Big Ten. They just can't score. Their offense isn't there. They're prolific against the lower level teams, and now Indiana this weekend. That's it.
It's a bowl game. They win. They go to the bowl game.
If you win, you go to a bowl because you're not beating Penn State on the road nor Michigan at home. Ohio State.
Probably, believe it or not, would play in the Military Bowl over in Annapolis. I would think at this point. Keeps costs down. You just come on a bus. Yeah. Families can come all see you. That's what you want. You want those families to be around those kids from Maryland right now. Speaking of not scoring, Navy didn't score for the first time since they got beat by San Jose State when Mike McIntyre, is now the Colorado coach, was at San Jose State. 12-0 in favor of San Jose State that day. In Cincinnati, look, we saw Navy run for 569 yards against Cincinnati last year. This year, not so much. Cortez Broughton, no relation to your friend Dave Broughton, making sure of that. With 11 tackles on the day and a 42-0 Cincinnati win.
Yeah, they couldn't block Cortez Broughton up front, but they didn't block a lot of people. There's free runners all day from what I saw, and it's been a long time since I saw the Navy offense look that way. Just completely discombobulated, could not sustain anything. I mean, they'd get a drive going and there'd be some sort of negative play, either a penalty or a
loss of yardage.
A loss of yardage play, and the triple option doesn't work that way. You can't overcome those negative plays. And third, they brought Zach Abey back at starting quarterbacks for the first time since last season. He's now the third starting quarterback. That tells you all you need to know. The Navy's grasping at straws. They do not have a quarterback who's clearly the guy, and so they keep trying to use his, Malcolm Perry, it didn't work out. Garrett Lewis, no, not real so much of a spark. Try to go back to Zach Abey and at least maybe have that interior power game that they displayed early last season. And it wasn't Zach Abey's fault. There was nowhere to go.
Yeah, Cincinnati was dominant defensively. Yeah. It was just a good performance by the Bearcats. Continue
and the killer,
to show people why the AAC is such a good league.
Yeah, and the Bearcats moved in the top 25 this week, number 25.
Well deserved.
And now Navy goes to Central Florida, which is number 11 in the AP poll. They dropped. They beat Temple, pretty, convinced, a double-digit win, and they lost a spot in a poll. You got to be kidding me.
Here's the thing. Rick Neuheisel said it best last week on his radio show on Sirius XM. Division I football lists 130 teams. Mm-hmm. It's not 130 teams. It's 65. Yeah. The other 65 do not have a chance.
No.
Central Florida is living proof of that. They've won 22, I think, straight games now. And, teams with multiple losses or a loss have been ranked ahead of them. They're never going to get to that echelon. No. They can't schedule the way these people want them to schedule unless the American becomes accepted as a Power 6 conference at that point.
Well, and I think there's an agenda right now by the ESPN network to discredit the American Athletic Conference because they're in a TV negotiation, and ESPN does not want to recognize the American Athletic Conference as a quote-unquote Power 6 or even being on that level. And right now you got ESPN commentators left and right bashing Central Florida. It's really not fair. All Central Florida does is go out and win, and been very impressive doing so, and they're getting killed.
Look at the ratings on the Central Florida games, though, that are on ESPN. They're great.
See, UCF Temple was the highest rated game of the year for ESPN.
Since the opening week on Thursday night.
Yep.
So there you have it.
But Navy, that Mackenzie Milton Company, that's going to be a tall order for Navy going down there to Orlando on Saturday.
Yep. You're right. And I got to fly at 7 o'clock in the morning Saturday morning
after
the Veterans Classic on Friday night.
Don't forget about that big game, Maryland Navy in basketball Friday night. Haven't played since 1985. Len Bias and David Robinson were patrolling the paint in those days.
Leonard Bias and company won 59-54, I believe it was, in an NCAA tournament game. Now, pros, Redskins and Ravens. Redskins fruitless against the Falcons and that high-powered offense. For once, Washington's defense didn't rise to the test. Redskins still a game up in the division, though, in first place. However, for the Ravens, season slipping away, Bill. 3 losses in a row now, 4-5. Steelers are in first place at 5-2-1. In September, you would have thought these two places would be reversed based on the way the teams were playing. But now, Steelers are on the way up, and the Ravens looking for answers right now with a bye week at hand.
I attended the Ravens game yesterday, and it was really disappointing. Their defense is mediocre now. It's about the vaunted Ravens defense is no longer scaring anyone. Steelers, unbelievable third down conversions. Anytime they need a conversion on third down, Ben Roethlisberger dump, usually to James Conner coming across the middle, or Antonio Brown. And Ravens couldn't cover these crossing patterns or short patterns out of the backfield. Just getting killed by Ben Roethlisberger on the little dump offs, whereas on the other side, Joe Flacco cannot convert a third down. He was all over the place.
How about the fact that they got Roethlisberger out of the game? Josh Dobbs comes in on a third down and completes a 22-yarder to Juju Smith-Schuster.
Out of his own end zone.
Yeah,
that play said it all.
Look, I'm telling you right now, offensively, Steelers are loaded.
Yeah,
Steelers have skilled people like you wouldn't believe. They don't even need Le'Veon Bell.
I was just saying, can you imagine if Le'Veon Bell does come back? They are loaded. Well, what happened in Washington? Because it's funny, I'm texting with my friend. He was at the Redskins game. I'm at the Ravens game, and I'm telling the Ravens losing, not looking good. And what about the Skins and Falcons are blowing them out? They couldn't stop Matt Ryan and company. Would they get no pressure on him?
4 touchdowns for Matt Ryan, and that was it. Matt Ioannidis got 1 sack. Outside of that, that was pretty much all she wrote.
And Redskins got some injury issues on the offensive
Brandon
line.
Sheriff a torn pec, Sean Laval a knee.
Trent
Williams is still out a
already
couple
out.
more weeks. So you're going to essentially be missing 3/5 of your offensive line, either for the rest of the season or at least for a number of weeks.
I read in the paper that Morgan Moses or somebody came out and somebody said Ioannidis might have had to play offensive line.
He would have been the emergency offensive lineman because Ty Nsekhe got hurt, and Moses said, "Bro, you can't come out. We ain't got nobody left."
Right.
So you got to stay in the game, even though it looked like he'd hurt his arm or his hand or something like that. So he had to stay in the game. That's how bad it got for the Redskins yesterday. Look, get on out there. We detailed it for you. You can go to aacounty.org and find out as well where the games are this weekend. Those Division I games are Saturday starting at 10:30 at Severna Park High School. Games at Annapolis and Severna Park on Friday night, and then at Annapolis and Glen Burnie, or Severna Park and Glen Burnie rather, on Sunday. Plenty of action this weekend. It's the final weekend of the season. Please get out there and support all those great coaches and volunteers who have made it happen for all these young men all season long, and some young women who have played in the AAYFA as well. Our thanks to you as always. We'll be back again next week with another edition of the Gridiron Review.